If you are a competitive gaming sweat, or you just want to try the best gaming gear there is, this is a setup you have to go for. We'll take an in-depth look at the BenQ ZOWIE XL2566K and the Razer DeathAdder V3. There are many things that I absolutely love about these products, but there are also a few that I dislike. Let's go through them and start with the Razer DeathAdder V3. The click latency is incredibly low at 0.1 milliseconds, and comparative motion latency is about 1 millisecond ahead of the CA13C. The results are incredible, and the lower the latency is, the better. But we are at the point where the real-world value of these improvements is non-existent. Your in-game experience and how responsive a mouse actually feels is very much affected by things such as weight, shape, sensor position, and even mouse feet. That's why I think that the polling rate difference at 8000Hz and 4000Hz is most of the time meaningless. The visual benefits that you get for a smoother experience with high frame rates and high refresh rates are actually mostly already there with 4000Hz. And let's not forget the fact that there are still system and game specific issues at high polling rates. With my old Intel system 8K worked pretty much perfectly, but with my new beefier AMD system I have some stutters in CSGO and Quake Champions. Nothing extreme and it can't even be caught on camera, but it was bad enough for me to lose some fights that I normally would not have lost. So as 4000Hz works perfectly on my machine with any game, and I can't really tell the performance difference between 8000 and 4000Hz, there is no reason for me to use 8000Hz. But that does not make the wired DeathAdder V3 a bad choice by any means. If you are not bothered by the cable, you can get the mouse for much cheaper, and even when you are actually using 4000Hz, these wired 8000Hz Razer mice actually poll at 8000Hz for click events, meaning that you would get that 0.16 millisecond click latency even at 4000, 2000 or 1000Hz. On top of that, the motion latency is also of course better on a wired 4000Hz mouse than it is on a wireless one, but the difference is so small that there is no way that you would feel this in-game. Overall, in my opinion, it kind of falls to you guys as consumers whether you think this is a good purchase or not. There is barely any performance difference, but the price difference is massive. And the DeathAdder V3 wired also has nicer, more premium feeling and more grippy smooth touch coding. In my opinion, this version of the DeathAdder V3 definitely does make sense, but I will say that I might actually go with the wireless one if I had to choose which one I would buy. The wireless freedom is just quite important for me. Let me know in the comment section, what would you choose? I guess that's it for the mouse. So let's move ahead and talk about the display a little bit more. First of all, some context. So I previously used the XG27AQM from ASUS that I have right here, and I was very impressed by 1440p. It actually proved way more beneficial for me than I initially thought. It was much easier for me to see enemies in multiple games with that higher resolution, and in CS you can use this 1440p stretched res, which is actually quite high quality, so the game looks decent. And of course you get that stretched effect, which kind of makes it even easier for you to see opponents. The AQM is also 270Hz, so I was not quite sure how big of a difference can actually 90Hz make. But the difference is massive. I was never unhappy with the XG27AQM, but once I got this beast, it just became quite clear to me how good this monitor is. Configuring your settings properly and then using Diag Plus makes this a very different kind of beast. The most important settings for me in terms of visibility are Diag, AMA and sharpness. CS, Quake and Overwatch are all games where the FPS is very high, so I'm pretty much always using Diag, but if you play Battle Royale games or such, you might want to use Adaptive Sync. For AMA, I found the setting 15 to be pretty much perfect for me in any situation, and we will talk about the latency, gray-to-gray response times and overshoot in a bit when we go through the performance. Sharpness then again is a setting that I absolutely love in gaming monitors, and most of the time I bump it up very high, as I do with this monitor as well, so I use that maximum at 10. Just with these settings I'm getting a very incredible competitive gaming experience, but remember that most of these settings are very much personal preference. For example, ZOWIE is using the color vibrance 20 and I absolutely hate it, and Simple is not using Diag at all. Whatever you use, as long as as your AMA is set somewhat properly, you're gonna have a great gaming experience, but as the monitor is a TN panel, your experience in content consumption might not be so great. Slouching and trying to watch a movie or anything from the monitor when it's on the default angle that you normally use just does not work. The monitor is of course off right now, but it will look just the same, so it basically looks all black. So basically every time you go slouching, you have to adjust the angle and readjust it back once you're done and sitting properly. That's the first thing that really pissed me off coming from an IPS monitor, but I got used to it pretty fast. Now the second downside is more subjective, but in my opinion it's a downside that this monitor is only 1080p. With this performance and 1440p, it would be my endgame monitor. The last downside are the colors, but mainly if you want to play with high saturation or color vibrance. If I set the color vibrance for anything higher than 14, all the vibrant colors just seem to blend into each other. Again, it seems to be very hard for me to show this on camera so that it's clear for you guys, but here is a demonstration with a clip. This is the clip that we just saw, and in the end you can see the enemy model moving in front of this red wall. Using the color vibrance setting at 13 or preferably even lower, I can make out the enemy from this wall, but if I bump the vibrance up to 15, 16 or 17, the enemy model kind of blends into the wall on the background. So what a lazy man like me has done to make it very optimal for most situations is that I just use the color vibrance setting 7 from the monitor, and then I have the vibrance GUI with which I can set up different saturations for different applications. Let's move on and check out some test results that I got with the NVIDIA LDAT. The gray to gray response times are very impressive with the AMA 15 setting, and the overshoot is very minimal as I do not notice it at all in game. But if you are bothered by it and you can notice it at some point, you can drop the AMA to about 13 and the gray to gray response times are still very good. One thing to note is that using DIAC Plus does add some latency. I measured a 1 millisecond difference in end-to-end latency, but directly measuring the display latency shows about 2 millisecond difference. It's a little bit questionable to me that are these results actually correct and does DIAC actually add this much latency, but I at least can't tell any difference in latency with DIAC enabled or disabled in-game. Looking at the UFO test, the motion clarity is also insane, especially with DIAC, as you can notice a difference between it disabled and enabled. It's not a massive difference by any means and it's very hard to catch on camera, but one of these UFOs does look a little bit clearer, and this is with DIAC enabled. In-game it can be actually quite hard to tell the difference, but when there is fast motion, the image with DIAC is just clearer. I don't have the setup to demonstrate this very well on camera, but for example in CSGO when you're making a fast peek, or you are shoulder peeking, or even flicking, you can see enemies much clearer during those movements. Overwatch and Quake are also games where you can benefit from insane motion clarity. The visibility is overall very good in both of these games, but when you engage in a short-range tracking fight, for example with Treasure, the lack of any motion blur and the insane motion clarity make DIAC and the XL2566K very optimal for these kind of situations. The same goes of course for Quake in any close-ranged LG fight. Basically you have benefits in every scenario when there is fast movement on your screen, be it your crosshair moving fast because of a flick or enemy moving fast on your screen. The price of the monitor is in my opinion very decent in Europe and in US, but for us Nordic countries the price does not make too much sense. Luckily you can just order the display from Germany and save a lot of money. The biggest competition for the XL2566K is the PG279AQN. It's close to double the price, but it does have that 1440p resolution, and the IPS panel is just much better for content consumption. I haven't tried it myself yet, but for example Optimum Tech mentions that the in-game performance is pretty much the same as on the XL2566K. The monitor stand on these BenQ monitors is the best in the game, doesn't take that much space and it's very easy to maximize your room, for example for your mousepad and your keyboard. But how about the combination of high polling rate and high refresh rate? Well, the experience with 360Hz and 4000Hz or 8000Hz is incredibly smooth and extremely responsive. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the XL2566K and 4000Hz mice, and I do feel that the difference between 4000Hz and 1000Hz is more clear at 360Hz. That being said, a well-implemented 1000Hz mouse and a 360Hz monitor will still feel incredibly responsive. So if you're looking for every last bit of advantage from your setup, it definitely is there with this monitor, even if you're using 1000Hz mice. Thank you guys so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you in the next one.